What's known in the French circles is the series Sage, which we call the Peace and Commerce issue. And there were a number of special printings of that. And curiously enough, they're all type 2 or type 3, if you're familiar with the type 1, 2, and 3.
Bruce, what is type 3?
Type 3 is very similar to type 1, where the I and V, the N is under the B in Republic, whereas type 2 is under the U of Republic. And that's the engraver's mention underneath at the border of the stamp.
In order to remember which is which, I made a little sort of a rhyme for myself. INV under the U type 2. And that enables me to remember which is which.
But the difference between type 1 and type 3 has to do with differences in the text, very subtle differences in the text. In type 3, they redid the dies because they were starting to wear out. This is in 1898 to 1900, and that's where you'll find setenent pairs, where a type 2 will be setenent to a type 3, because they basically were replacing individual dies on the plate.
But I take it there are some that were printed both in type 1 and type 3, so that you have to get out your magnifying glass and look at the details of the lettering.
That's true. But if you collect a canceled copy, you can determine it by the date. There's a 5 centime yellow green that came out in 1898. That's a type 3. There's a 10-cent black on lilac. In the later years, this came out as a type 3. The 2 franc, which was only done in type 3, and that's a brown with a slightly blue background.
I have the Scott catalog, the classic specialized, to the pages concerning this issue, and they refer to the type 3 just as type 1 again.
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought, yes.
But I think the distinction you're making is terrific. There is a type 3. It's not really a type 1.
That's correct. And the French catalogs recognize that. The first one that came along is the what's known as the Regents print. And that was done immediately after issuing the stamps. And there were 3 specific albums that were given to the directors of the Bank of France. So that's and they were leather bound, and they did it in one of 2 ways. This is as the stamps would appear issued, but they're imperforate. They're on a little thicker paper, and they're all type 2. And you'll notice that the infamous 20-cent blue, 20 centime blue is included. And what's interesting is, for instance, on this 20-cent blue, which was never officially issued, that was printed originally in anticipation of a 20 centime rate for letter. And 1/2 of the full press sheet was perforated, and that was a type 1. The other half of the press sheet was type 2, and that was imperforate, and that was destined for the colonies, but never actually sent to the colonies. The purpose of this was basically a gift to notables. And they did it with the background color. They did it without the background color. And they also did a piece with just the background color. I don't have that one. And it was done over 2 different cycles, 1876 to 1877, and then one from 1878 to 1879. That's one special series, and they were using the original dies. but of the type 2 variety. The second one came out in 1887, and that's a impression again of the original dies. And it was the Minister of Marine and Colonies requested a special printing for these stamps, for the stamps used in the colonies. And the request was made to Monsieur Granet, who was the Commerce and Industry Minister in charge of the post at the time. And so sheets of 25 stamps were printed on a special paper. And it's special in that under UV light, it fluoresces. And that's the distinguishing feature between these and the regular stamps. They're also on a thinner paper than normal. But the set that Granet printed included stamps that were never issued to the colonies. They just went through the whole series. And this represents the whole series. And they did it gummed as well as ungummed. And what did they do with them? They gave them to special people in sheets of 25. The last special printing of this particular design was to commemorate the exposition of 1900. So there was a big expo. All of the Sage designs that had been printed since 1876 were included in this particular program. The paper is on Bristol paper, which is a thicker cream color paper, and it was printed ungummed. Simulated perforations were printed to form the exterior of the stamp, and that was done in a sepia color. So they're very easily identified different from a regular stamp because of that printed perforation. At the same time, postage due stamps were done, and some of the first series for the colonies were printed. There were other stamps that were printed in 1907 using the same format as this exposition printing, and those were designs that were not originally included in this series.
In the top row there, the first 5 stamps, all green, are those stamps that were ever regularly issued in those colors? I don't remember seeing those.
Yes, that's the very first series type 1 were issued in green. Of that series, the 2 mint is the more difficult to find.
A question, Bruce. In the group type, they also issued postal stationery on the Bristol cards for that exposition in 1900. I was wondering, did they do the type sage too, the Sage type?
As a
Postal stationery, where they printed.
stationery, I'm
Yeah.
not aware of it, and a research volume put out by UV-fluorescent doesn't mention that.
Okay.
But the difference on the 1 to 10 centime green for the special printing, that's all type 2. Whereas the original stamps were type 1 because that was before that was the original set that came out. And that was a plate of 150 designs. And then they doubled it when they went into full production to 300 images per plate. And the left-hand plate was the original type 1 plate, and the right-hand plate was the type 2 plate. And that's a whole different story as to why they came up with a type 2 plate that I've started putting a presentation on. These also were used to send to the UPU to identify what postage was legal at the time. And so you'll find collections of UPU sheets where you'll have one design per on each of the sheets, but the sheet will have all of the official designs as one sheet, but only one example of each. So That's what we have today. So these are hard to find. It took me about 10 years to put these together. And they rarely come on the market. So when they do, yeah, I had to jump.
Did you buy them as whole sets, or did you have to piece these sets together?
I started with Granet set, and I didn't get the full set. And I realized quickly that that was a mistake. So from there on, I bought full sets. The set for Universal Exposition of 1900, this is what is sold as a full set. And then the other, I believe, 4 or 5 stamps that go along with it are typically sold separately as a separate set or individually, and those you can find more readily.
Yeah, that's quite a collection. Wow.